Welcome to the Apeiron Life Podcast. Today we're going to interview Dr. David Martin on the concept of healthy signals, which is a huge framework for fitness and wellness and health span here at Apeiron Life. And David, I want to ask you just to first explain what is healthy signals and how did we come about in Apeiron Life to come up with that concept?
Yeah, it's fun. As you know, Eitan, you've been part of the whole thing. When we first got together, we as a team, the Apeiron Life team, we were trying to bring a lot of the approaches that we were using in elite sport to high-performing individuals in the Bay Area. But these are finance guys, they're CEOs, they're entrepreneurs, very ambitious, and they want to perform at the highest level. But it's not like you're trying to get them to win an NBA championship or gold medal. So Healthy Signals was a framework that allowed us to set goals and to identify priorities and to build progressions, just like we would with an elite athlete. But we had to kind of reframe our approach so that we were looking at things that are important for life. So let's start with health span, when that's where we started. Health span is becoming very, very popular. A lot of podcasts talking about health span. But what we did, I think that was a bit novel and unique at Apeiron Life, is we broke health span down. Instead of just saying, how does your body function as you go through your entire lifespan? Let's talk about the subcomponents of health span. So we started talking about different physiological systems. We named them, we defined them very specifically, and we said each of these different health span domains is important. We can measure it, and with lifestyle, we can keep that health span domain high. And so that's where it started. And we came up with 7. We had aerobic fitness, muscle fitness, body comp. We had bone health, movement quality, balance, and cognitive health. And the idea was that we know with age, all of those are going to lose function. But if you live your life the right way for you, you can kind of decrease the risk. You can decrease the risk of that particular system slowing. So everything started with an assessment of these health span domains. And then we started talking as a group about, okay, we can now identify where a person's strong or weak. We can test these health span domains. But how do we know if they're living a life that feeds the health span domains in the right way? And that was really the impetus to Healthy Signals. Healthy Signals was feeding each of these health span domains.
Yeah, so it's almost in a way, first we created the assessment and the evaluation. We categorize each of our tests for each health span domain. And after people tested, we asked the question, now what? How can we move this forward and track behaviors?
Yeah.
So do you want to touch about behaviors and how it relates to Healthy Signals?
Yeah. So that was exactly right. People, we're very intelligent, very motivated individuals, and they're going through some tests with us to see where their health span domain profile is. Some have really poor bone health. Some have really poor muscle fitness. Some people are terrible with aerobic fitness, but they're very, very lean. And so we do these tests, and then they'd look us right in the eye and go, so now what? That's exactly what they'd say. Like, so what are you going to do about it? And at first we were like, well, trust us, we're experts. Most of us have come from elite sport. We know what we're doing. Just you do finance, we'll do health, and let's just trust us. But that answer is not good enough. And we really didn't have, like you said in your introduction, a framework to work off of. So the way Healthy Signals would work is we started to break down each activity that somebody could be involved with. And we recognized that the modality of the exercise really, really matters. So certain types of activity, like lifting weights, they might be great for your muscle fitness, but they don't do a lot for your aerobic fitness. There might be things like, skipping rope, and that might be great for bone health, but it might not be necessarily that great for movement quality. Going out and hiking outside for an hour or two at very low intensity in these beautiful redwood trails that we have all around us. Amazing nature bath, great for cognitive health, but it might not be very good for your balance. So the idea was to go through a very extensive breakdown of all these different activities and build up a healthy signals profile for every activity you do. And then we could start to build up some calculations that allowed us to visualize how a person's lifestyle was contributing to their health span domains, which is essentially like unlocking the secret to life. Like, not only, we're not trying to say how long will you live, but we're trying to say for the years you are alive, let's make sure your body is working across all these health span domains.
So we basically, how do we measure the signal?
So the signal it's actually not conceptual. It's digital and it's numerical in a sense that we can take from wearable, like an Apple Watch, say, or from somebody who's using, say, a polar chest strap. If they're monitoring what they are doing, so what type of activity are you doing, and they're monitoring their heart rate, which is an indicator of intensity, and we know how long it lasts, then we can basically collapse all those variables, the frequency, intensity, time, and type of exercise, which is the components of exercise taught in undergraduates when they take an exercise phys class. But what we've been able to do is we've been able to compress that and focus it into a number that would give us insight into whether they're feeding one of these health span domains. And instead of having an arbitrary number, which is done a lot you see arbitrary units done a lot, especially for those of you that have ever been around elite sport. If you're working with triaxial accelerometers, everything's an arbitrary number. What we did, which I think is really clever, and I think for me, it was one of those days I, rode home and thought, damn, we're getting somewhere. This is cool, is when the numbers were connected to something meaningful. And so what we've been able to do is convert all of the data that come from the wearable, and we've been able to convert it to a unit and then normalize it to an ACSM guideline, or to normalize it to what the World Health Organization is saying is a minimum standard to be healthy. So for us, our healthy signals are kind of on a numeric scale where if you see 100, then you're basically reaching a minimum standard to help that particular health span domain stay resilient and stay functional as you move through decades of life.
So tell me, if you are a high executive, for example, or someone, a really busy person, how is that?
Somebody a little bit like you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How that can help them with their life?
Okay. So one of the most confusing things for a lot of individuals who have done exceptionally well in business, they weren't taking classes in biology, they weren't taking classes in exercise physiology, biochemistry. These are not always, they're not like on the med school track. These people they know cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and they understand, S&P 500 like really well. And so for some of them, they don't understand. You might have a female executive in her 60s. She looks amazing. She's very lean. She exercises 5 times a week. She's doing yoga and she's doing Peloton. She comes in and we test her. One of the health span domains I said is like bone health. And we have very capable DEXA technicians. Actually, our producer here with us today. Big shout out to Donnie Gregg running all the DEXA tests for the clients that come through with him and his team. And we will see very low bone mineral density, an indicator of poor bone health. Now, this woman in her 60s, she's like, are you kidding me? I exercise 5 times a week. And so what we can do from a practical perspective, you ask, how do healthy signals help? Like, how do they give you insight? Well, we can show this individual that one of your health span domains is very low and needs some attention. And when we look at the way you live your life with your yoga and your cycling, you're not really doing anything for bone health. And so what that will do is it will allow us to address priorities, but also build progression. So she can now start to visually see if she changes and puts, let's say, 1 or 2 days a week of resistance training in, that gets logged with her Apple Watch. It gets downloaded. We go through all this kind of proprietary algorithms that allow us to do the calculations. If she sees a score of 50, she knows she's feeding her bones at a suboptimal level. If she gets that score up to 100, she's probably meeting minimum standards for health. If she's up at 150 or 200, she might actually be potentially growing or almost completely stopping some of the bone mineral detriments that are occurring as she ages.
So can you give me, and I'll ask that question also for Donnie, since he has
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of
a great
interest in bones. What would be some type of activities that would be very beneficial for bone health?
Yeah, so do you want to should we hit Donnie, or do you want me to give Donnie a hit? I mean,
should
Donnie's the bone expert.
yeah.
Donnie, we're pulling you
The
off of
Bones
your
Brigade
commander.
commander.
Producer role. You're on the podcast.
Well, if you insist, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first and foremost, you mentioned it before with skipping ropes, so stuff that has a lot of higher impact has proven to be very positive for bone health. A surprising one that when we're going through all the research and coming with the weightings that we use to come up with our calculation, a lot of dance.
That's right.
Yeah, love that. Yeah.
So if you like to dance, go ahead and get after it. More sport-like activities, so recreational basketball, things like that, and I mean, first and foremost, just lifting weights.
Yeah. It's a great point too, and I think one of our we have a really great scientific advisory board, and one of those individuals is Keith Bart, and I think Keith shared a couple papers that you and I had looked at, Donnie and Eitan, where it's really interesting how quickly the stimulus for trying to promote bone health and bone adaptations and remodeling, how quickly it saturates.
Yes.
It doesn't need much, does it? Like 5-10 minutes, you can start to really give yourself a little dose, and even potentially build strategies where you dose multiple times a day. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, that's why I think people sometimes there's some misconception about long distance running for bone health. And it shows, I know Rich Willey is a professor at University of Montana, talks about, basically diminishing return of the long distance running. The bone gets bored from that repetitive, low amplitude loading of long distance running, and not as healthy as people think, versus sprinting, which is more short, high amplitude, intense loading, and will give you more. But now we're looking at on holistic approach, and we got to think about joint health as well. So we know that sometimes what's good for the bones might not be ideal for the joints or tendon. Let's think about like playing basketball. Bone density is tremendous. We know retired NBA players, for example, their knees are all broken, knee replacement, etc. So we got to find that sweet spot. Yeah, you got to take care of the bone, but you got to maintain also your joint health and tendon health, etc.
Yeah, it's, I think the clients here at Apeiron Life got it really good because, the expertise is so high. And although there's all the razzle-madazzle, all the stuff out there in the health and wellness industry, which is just booming, like, we've seen numbers are just, the market's just exploding right now. But with that comes really difficult decisions that you need to make on what to focus on. There's so much out there. You get fear of missing out. And I feel like the Healthy Signals is a really nice way. It's a framework that allows people to make sure they do not neglect the most important aspects of their week. Really focus on the things that matter first. You want to talk about slow release magnesium. You want to talk about, there's so many nuances people are doing. Like, you want to talk about how you set up your room to make sure your sleep latency is slightly decreased. Like, there's 1,000 things. This oil, this seed oil, this, and they're just little nuancy things, But this is like really basic, isn't it? Your bones are in need of support, and you're not living your life in a way that supports those bones. And the Healthy Signal profiles showed the gap between a needs analysis, this is what you need, and this is what you do. And that gap analysis, it's so intuitive. And I can't believe other people haven't done it. And I don't know why. I think there's a fascination with heart rate. You see Whoop, you see Garmin, you see Polar. They're just heart rate. Everybody's into heart rate. And what we've done is kind of flip the script, and we're really big on frequency, and we're really big on modality. And I can't believe we're the only ones to unlock this secret, but it's pretty intuitive stuff, isn't it? Like, if you explain it to your mom or your brother or sister, people are like, yeah, I totally get it. And I think that's why our clients like Healthy Signals, is because they get it too.
Very well. Do you want to touch about other aspects of health span or the specific
Yeah.
signal categories. Talking about movement quality, for
Yeah.
example. So touch base about like, let's go through each
Okay.
health span and just break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's start from movement quality.
Yeah. So a lot of our approach to movement quality, and Eitan, with your background, you've had huge influence on how we both assess and how we engage with trying to keep people moving well. It may seem like a vague term, but it fits. I mean, some people talk about balance and stability, and there's different terms, but I do like movement quality because as people get older, they get stiffer, and for every joint, there's a range of motion, and that range of motion can be compromised. And the other thing that happens is even if you have full range of motion, you can be painful. And so it feels sore and you feel tentative when you try to use it. So the idea behind movement quality is to go through the major joints of your body and to try to make sure that you're maintaining good range of motion and that it's pain-free and that you're strong throughout that range. So things like yoga are wonderful and they're phenomenal. And so our healthy signals that come off of yoga-like activities or Pilates-like activities, they're high. But then there's other activities like cycling, you can imagine, that's very constrained. Your neck, your shoulders, your elbows, your wrist, your back, there's not a lot of movement going on. And even through the lower body, it's very limited. So the movement quality, healthy signal coming off of cycling is super low. I think that the thing that people will forget is if you have a desk job and you just have to get in your car, drive to work, sit down, work on your computer, go home, fix dinner, watch a show, go to bed. That is, your movement quality can be deteriorating before your very eyes, and you will never, never know until something happens where you're forced to use a joint and you haven't been through that range of motion in a long time. Our testing kind of explores where somebody's at in essentially an arbitrary way, but we try to allow people to come to terms with where their body's actually at.
So I've been thinking about very specific activity of daily living, such as picking something from the floor,
Putting on your shoes,
tying your shoelaces, shampooing your hair, things like that.
Women talk about as they get older, taking off their bra. The clips are on the back and trying to reach back there. Like there's putting on flight. How many clients have we said that they just can't get their overhead, their luggage in the overhead compartment? And that's one of the first things they notice. So like one, it might be weakness, but two, it could be range of motion too, and movement quality. Yeah.
So another activity that might be helpful is obviously when we talk about resistance training, there's always the argument, should you work through full range of motion or should you work on mid-range where it's safe? So again, if people don't have any specific injuries, training through underload through full range of motion might be very important. Yep. So another activity that will help movement quality.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah.
So David, let's talk about muscle fitness now. Obviously, one is very obvious. So can you talk?
Muscle fitness can get super confusing. Again, grab an Instagram feed, type in muscle fitness, and just watch all of the nuances out there. I mean, it is fun. It's a circus, isn't it? Like there are people doing things that are just wild. We keep it pretty basic. In the upper body, can you push? Can you pull? That happens in a lot of different planes, which means you can pull up, you can pull straight towards you, you can pull down, but it's essentially pushing and pulling. We look at the core, which really reveals itself well in something like planking, or a back extension where you hold isometrically. It's a muscular endurance test, but you can really look at the muscle fitness around the core, which is important for stabilizing. And then for lower body, there's two kind of major movements. There's squatting, a triple extension from the ankle, knee, hip, triple extension or a squatting movement. That's fundamental for life. And then there's also hinging, which is the lower legs. They're not really moving through the knee and the ankle as much, but what you're doing is you're like a deadlift. You're reaching down and you're trying to pull something up. Yard work, picking up the hose, very, very practical. Those fundamental movements are underpinned by the quality of the muscle and the ability to generate force. If you generate force with speed, that's called power. And so we're interested in how strong the muscles are to support those basic movements. If you're injured or you have a lot of people will have, osteoarthritis. They have some type of a an issue that's come up or some kind of lingering pain associated with an injury, then strengthening an individual takes on new meaning, because instead of taking drugs or surgery, there's a lot you can do with resistance training. So resistance training is about being strong to make sure you don't get hurt, you stay functional, but also so that you can fully rehabilitate from any problems that you have.
And we do have a lot of Apeiron members or clients per se that loves to do all kind of different activity, from wing foiling, kite surfing, to climbing the Himalayas.
It's amazing.
And some of our almost like spiel to them, like, if you want to keep doing those activities relatively pain-free and in high level, resistance training will give you that envelope of function.
That's right.
To push it to a bigger function.
Don't you love it? I got to listen in on some of your conversations. Don't you love it? You have somebody, and we've got some great strength coaches, strength conditioning specialists that we work with. And you're sitting there with a client and they're like, hey, I'm getting ready for a ski trip. Should I be doing box jumps, or should I be doing, or they're golf. I love the golfers, they're in terrible shape. And they're like, can you help me? I want to put a couple more yards on my drive. And it's like, buddy, you can't get out of a chair. Like, there's some fundamental strength, muscle fitness deficits that need to be corrected first. We'll get you to driving that ball farther, and we'll get you so you enjoy a full day of skiing. But first, fundamentally, you're going to have to address some of these. Some of them are really weak. And we all know this. As you get older, it gets harder and harder to maintain the muscle mass, harder and harder to stay strong.
So, David, what other activities can help with muscle fitness? Or Donna, you can jump in there. Like, okay, resistance training is obvious.
Yeah.
What other things?
No, go ahead, Don. The first one that comes to my mind is like when we were, as a group, we were going through all the different types of cardiovascular training you can do. There's running, which doesn't recruit tons of muscle mass. And then there's rowing. So all of a sudden, like rowing, or, with the cross-country skiing double pole ergometer, there's a whole number of muscle groups that are recruited. You think of it as a cardiovascular training drill because it's rhythmic and the heart rate goes up, high stroke volume, high cardiac output. But at the same time, more so than running, you're recruiting a lot more motor units in more muscles. And so that comes to mind to me. I think we weighted some of those healthy signals higher with those activities.
You took the example right out of my head, David, and rowing is a great one if you're short for your weekly signal requirements for both aerobic and muscle fitness.
Yeah.
Or, hey, you're 20% short of both those goals, rowing would be a good idea if you want to get to your target for both of those.
There's another concept too. I mean, you brought it in, Eitan, which is really interesting. And, we've got to make sure that our healthy signals weight and record these activities appropriately. This idea of snacking, like you're just working away and sort of drop down and you do 3 sets of 2-minute planks, So all of a sudden you're basically working, but you've just provided, with an isometric, you've provided a stimulus for that muscle to be maintained.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll give an example from my own life. I love to train jiu-jitsu early in the morning, and there is a weight room just beside it. I just go right after. I'm already sweaty. I'm already ready to go. Instead of showering and then trying to fit it again through the day, I just go do a few sets of a few things, 15, 20 minutes, and I got a good breakfast snack of resistance training.
Yeah.
Ready to go. So it doesn't have to be a lot, but the microdosing adds up throughout the week, and the signals can build up and be more than minimal effective dose.
I think I saw one commentary again. The internet is just rich. It's always fun to take a couple hours a week and just see what's out there and what people are talking about. And the transition from going to airports with luggage and everything's on wheels, which is awesome. And then you get on those little people movers, which is awesome. And you got the escalators, which is awesome. But to grab the suitcase and to just keep swapping back and forth, right side, left side, and say, I'm going to carry it and do the stairs and not use the people mover. To your point, you just added, you're starting to feed muscle fitness, and you're basically on a trip in the airport. Yeah. So there's a lot of innovative approaches to try to put some more muscle fitness stimulus in your day.
Let's talk briefly about balance as a Healthman domain. What do we know? And we're going to do future episodes about each Healthman domain, which we're going to dive deep into that. But just balance and aging, just touch base on it, and what type of activities, can help the signals of balance.
Well, probably one of the big eye-opener moments for me working here at Apeiron Life was when we were going through different types of balance tests. And we had a really simple balance test. They call it the stork test. You stand on one foot, put your hands on your hips, and just stand on one foot, eyes open, lift that knee up. And I thought, look, this is a pretty basic test. We've come from Olympic training centers, institutes of sport, Stanford, athletics. Like, certainly we can test balance better than that. But then we found those papers, Eitan, remember. I'm like, holy crap, this is really important.
The 10 seconds.
The 10-second test for just a basic, I was like, this is crazy. So then you start to say the data are fairly compelling that when you lose the ability to stand on one foot for at least 10 seconds, your odds ratios and your risk for different types of early mortality, like cardiovascular disease, is higher. So then you start thinking about, okay, so maybe we don't need to get crazy complex. Maybe we can stay fairly simple in some of our approaches to balance. And I know you've used this really cool, I do it as well with the electric toothbrush one.
Yes.
You explain it, because I love it. I do it as well. Yeah.
So something that's really simple and easy, we sometimes like, when you train, do that and that exercise, but how you can incorporate some kind of balance activity throughout your day that you don't have to like put extra time for it. So basic thing is when you brush your teeth, if you have an electric toothbrush, it's usually give you a little buzz every 30 seconds. Yeah. And you basically stand on one leg. When you hear the buzz or you feel the buzz, you switch legs. Yeah. And if you have good balance, you can do it with eyes closed. If your balance is not that great, you do it with your eyes open. As you get better, you can start closing your eyes where you don't get the sensory input of the visual part. So that's an easy way.
I think and I'm not giving any names away, but some of the folks we're working with they're super high profile, CEOs, like extremely high profile. And I remember the wife of one of these super high profile executives in our facility saying, why did you tell my husband to brush his teeth on one leg with his eyes closed? He does it every day and he tells me I should be doing it too. And I just thought that's amazing that they're just locking on, because it makes sense. You told them this one little thing, they lock on, it makes sense. I'll say one other thing about balance. And again, they'll shout out to Donnie on this one and all the strength and conditioning coaches that we work with. Is lifting is not just lifting. There's a lot of things you can do when you're lifting. And I know, Eitan, you've been a big proponent to try to help with balance. Instead of doing squats, move to lunges. You can use dumbbells in both hands and you can move into a forward or reverse lunge. And you're still working out the quadricep muscles and the glutes, but now you're starting to put in, maybe you could talk about your thoughts there.
Yeah, so narrowing the base of support, that's one way. Staggered stance, single leg exercises. Instead of deadlift, do a single leg deadlift, do a lot of step ups, and then you can lift the opposite leg up to create a balance component. Incorporate unstable surfaces in a safe way, of course, based on their ability. Things like that are super, super important. And I want to touch on another point. Sometimes we assess here people in their 70s as well. We have very fit 70 years old. But one thing that was very obvious, they cannot hide the decline of balance. And we have an uphill walking protocol to assess aerobic capacity. And you can see as the treadmill starts to incline more, they lose balance. So that's very, very obvious. Some of them are very strong, and on all the muscle fitness tests, they're doing very well. But you can see it on the balance. So a lot of times we target the program for the people like 65, 70 and above. There is a big emphasis on the balance component, because we know I think it's the number 4 cause of death in the U.S.
That's right.
Is falls and complication from falls. So.
And you raise a really good point. I know we're going through our list, so I don't want to get too sidelined, but the industry that we're working in right now, in some ways, it's super helpful. Like imagine, with Apple, people are very familiar with close your rings. You can go out and you can walk your steps and close your rings. And that's good because some people are motivated, they're moving. But it's also bad because you might think in your head, hey, I'm living a healthy life. I've just closed my rings. And what you're talking about with balance, although we take it very seriously, and it's a super important, like you said, 3-4 number killer in the country with complications associated with falls. Close your rings tells you nothing about balance. You can close your rings and give your balance zero stimulus. So you're doing nothing for a very important component of your health, and you're getting lulled into a sense of security that I closed my rings, I'm fine. So I think that highlights the importance, like the national importance. You can even go say the global importance of being more familiar with your healthy signals than just getting locked into one parameter, which in and of itself is fine. But if you think that's all there is to holistic health and wellness, you're missing the plot.
Yeah. Very good point, David. Very good point. Let's go to the next health span domain. Let's talk about cognitive function.
Yeah, love cognitive. And cognitive is one of those ones I think we wrestled with at Apeiron Life. It's probably been one of the trickiest ones. How do you assess it? And then what do you do about it? Cognitive health is usually looked at as I'm forgetting things, and my dad had dementia, and I should go get tested, and you go see a neurologist, and it's scary. It's your brain. There's something very personal about the brain. Your muscles are weak, you can laugh it off, I can't do a pull-up, but no one's that scared. They're like, if I train a bit, I'll get strong and I'll be there. But when it comes to the brain, when the brain's not functioning, that's like who you are, that's your identity. So we've had to be really careful about, one, how do we assess it, and how do we assess it in a way that we can do something about it? So we focused on, we searched a number of different companies. Give a little shout out to React Neuro. They're a startup that's working out of Boston. It's got, an MIT affiliate. There's some Harvard professors that work in with them. We like them because they're basically taking tried and true tests into this virtual reality environment. So you can put on a headset, very much like we're seeing with all these different gaming devices. You can put on a headset, and then we will administer 2 different tests. One looks at neural processing speed, very much like muscle fitness declines with age. Neural processing speed also declines. Doesn't mean that you can't get that crossword puzzle done, but it might take you a little bit more time. Doesn't mean you can't read, but your reading comprehension might go down a little bit slower. So the way we do neural processing speed is we do this thing called a trail making task. The details aren't important, but basically it allows your brain to try to search and retrieve and then find motor control to react and respond. And through a variety of different instruments within this headset, they can look at how your eyes are moving, and they can look at the timing between hitting different targets. So then the other thing we do is verbal fluency. We pick 2 things that we think have a lot of ecological validity. They're very relevant to life.
David, for the listener, what is ecological validity?
Yeah, ecological validity is doing a test that means something outside of the test itself. So some people will get really good at gaming, and so they can play a game, but really it has no impact on how they live their life. They're just good at this game. Like a game may be a driving car game, and you're good at that, but you're still a terrible driver. Yeah. So that has poor ecological validity. Good ecological validity is like a VO2 max test. And once we know a high aerobic capacity, it means that there's a whole number of aspects in your life that you're going to be more capable of. So it has a lot of direct relevance to the way people live their life. But it's a great point. So with cognitive tests, that a lot of them have been seen as being esoteric and nuanced and not very important for life. But I think everybody recognizes that. I'm in the store and I'm trying to find, a certain brand of coffee, or I'm looking for something in a spreadsheet. I've got to find it and I've got to act on it. And we also know verbal fluency, like we're trying to remember names and we're trying to come up with the right words at the right time. And we know that people that are older, it slows down. So then we can test it. And then the question is, well, what do you do about it? Well, the cool thing about cognitive health is there are now interventions. The quiet mind, which happens with yoga, is good. We know that nature baths, being outside in the trees and in the forests and in nature, is good for the brain. We also know that high intensity, there's all these brain-derived neurotrophins, just big words for different proteins that are produced that help feed the brain and help maintain what's called neuroplasticity. So what we can do for somebody who's on the slower end or the lower end, we can go after different elements of their activities to say, let's change the composition a little bit to feed your cognitive health better. Certainly, we haven't got into this, and this is probably a whole nother episode, is how nutrition and sleep contribute to healthy signals, but it also allows us to recognize that a person's lifestyle is not just their activity. How they eat and how they sleep also interacts with their activity patterns.
So let me ask you, not tough question, but kind of interesting one. If I'm a high executive and I have an important board meeting, for example, I gotta perform well, would you recommend, if I have let's say I have an hour before the meeting, would you go walk outside, shower and dress up, or would you do like a HIIT on a cycle ergometer or something like that? What would you say?
I think what you've done, I would tell the executive, and this is kind of the thought process that we go through, and the question's a great one, is to make it really, really practical. There's probably two elements. One, what does the science support? And then two, what is that person familiar with? So if we just go,
and how fit they are.
And I was going to say, like, somebody's about to go in a big board meeting. They've never done a high intensity uphill, sprint session, and they strain a calf right before they go in. That'd be, catastrophic. So, and that's where I think our staff recognize that the science is going to lead us into some options. We can use, you mentioned like almost like a cold shower, a hot shower, or a contrast shower to try to wake up the brain and to almost be like a stimulant. We talked about something like high intensity exercise, which could help feed the brain and provide extra blood flow to the brain. But then there's also, we talked about the quiet mind, which is like get out, go for a walk, hear the birds, calm your brain, and just let everything that you've already prepped, just let that all calm down and solidify. And you know that when you need to pull on that information, it's going to be there. And you don't want to go in all rattled. You want to go in calm and capable so that your thoughts are very organized. And a lot of that would be sitting with the client saying, we know what the science says. We know what feeds cognitive health. We know what primes cognitive performance. But now what we have to do is work with you and say what's going to be right for you. And let's explore a bit and then nail what works for you.
So you got me thinking.
Great. I love it.
So, and probably one of the most important health span domains that everyone talks about, and it's Dr. Martin's specialty, is aerobic fitness, cardiorespiratory fitness, cardiovascular fitness.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so this one's one of the easier ones to lock into because the American College of Sports Medicine and the World Health Organization, big health organizations recognize through numerous epidemiological studies where they review people that die early and people that have longer lives and healthier lives. They look at activity patterns, and it's pretty clear that people who are exercising for less than 150 minutes a week, they are going to have complications as they get older. And the risk of them having heart problems and even some cancers is higher. And so one kind of surrogate measure, just a unit of measure that's really easy to categorize people on, is your aerobic fitness high, moderate, or low, is VO2 max. And a lot of people are talking about VO2 max. It used to be, I didn't hear anyone on radio or podcast or nobody talked about VO2 max unless you were working with an athlete who won the Tour de France, and people would say, how high is his VO2 max? So the numbers range. They can be up over 85 to 90. It's in the published literature. We've had that. I've worked with individuals with VO2 maxes over 85 mils per kg. That's very high. That's how many milliliters of oxygen they're consuming per minute per kilogram body weight. And it means the heart's pumping all this oxygenated blood out, and the muscles with all their mitochondria are extracting that oxygen, and they're combusting a fuel, which is usually carbohydrate at the high intensities, and they're producing a cycling power or a running speed. So that's a high number. A low number is like 15 milliliters per kilogram per minute. And some have estimated that's like a zone of frailty. If your VO2 max is less than 15 mils per kg, just daily living becomes a very arduous task. You can't make your bed. You can't go shopping. You can't get up a flight of stairs. You can't do the dishes and put them away. Basic things are going to become a real struggle for you. So the nice thing about this trait is it's very adaptable. So with the right type of stimulus, and we just talked about 150 minutes, per week of just moderate activity. That's like a brisk walk, 30 minutes in the morning, 5 days a week, and you're starting to hit a minimum standard to help protect health. We can maintain our VO2 max with a fairly modest input, and we can improve our VO2 max if we want to start to add in a little bit of high intensity exercise or some, they call it HIIT or high intensity exercise.
So the other part of the ACSM guidelines, 150 minutes of moderate intensity or
75 minutes of high intensity. So, and that high intensity is not max. It's like on an RPE scale, it's 7, to 8, which is vigorous and it's like purposeful. But when I talk about moderate, you can still talk. They talk about the talk test. When it gets to vigorous, you're not talking in full sentences. They're just little words popping out. But it's still an intensity you can maintain for 2 to 4 minutes. So yeah, so that if you don't have time, a very time efficient way to go, as long as you don't get injured from it, is to try to accumulate 75 minutes. So that's 3 25-minute sessions, and you can do that and save yourself a whole lot of time. But the benefits are huge. The data is coming out now that if you have a low aerobic fitness, your risk for cardiovascular disease and cancers, if you're in the lowest 25th percentile for your age and sex, you are basically gambling with your life. The odds are that you will die early, and the odds are that you are going to pick up something nasty that's going to require medical treatment. So we treat that one pretty seriously.
So let me ask you a question just in regards to aerobic fitness and health span domain. Does the elevation of heart rate has to be consistent? What I mean with it, if I'm, for example, lifting weights and my heart rate goes up, obviously above my baseline, is that improving my aerobic capacity?
Yeah, it can. At the lower your aerobic fitness, the more almost anything helps. And we spent quite a bit of time. We talked about it's all about healthy signals. If you go into the weight room, are we going to give you a healthy signal for aerobic fitness as 0? No, we actually weight the heart rate during the resistance training, because we know that although the stimulus for muscle fitness is highest, there's also a stimulus for cardiovascular fitness as well. You have to treat the heart rate differently. A high heart rate, think about this, it's a really different physiology. When you're out running, it means that the oxygen uptake that you have is matched with the workload that you're doing. So the heart rate is reflective of the running speed. We call it steady state. But when you're lifting, you can almost hold your breath, get those 10 reps out, rack the weight, and then your heart rate surges at the end. So it's an interesting phenomenon, because the heart rate is elevated and the muscles are not even under tension. What oxygen is doing in that case is it's being utilized, still going to the muscles, but what it's being utilized for is to try to restock all these kind of anaerobic energy stores that you use to drive those high intensity muscle contractions. So it's a disconnect. And we know that the best way to lift VO2 max is when the oxygen uptake is matched to the workload, not coming in little spurts after the workload. Not to say that it's not important, it just isn't the same quality as signal. And we take that into account with healthy signals.
Are we missing any health span domain there on the list?
Probably the one is body composition.
Body composition.
Yeah, and I only say that because if we leave, and Donnie, who's producing this show today, if we do not say anything about body composition, we'll be filming another episode. Maybe we just hit the highlights, and let's bring Donnie back in, because our approach to body composition, one, how we measure it, but then 2, how we look at different activities that feed it, I think it is unique and novel. Most people just go body fat, Donnie, but you've really opened all our eyes up to, muscle and visceral adipose tissue. Maybe you can talk about how we assess body comp, but also what contributes to improving it.
So this is why they call me DEXA Donnie. We do in fact use the DEXA. We use the same one, try to run with the same technician every time to ensure accurate and repeatable results. And as we always say when someone comes in, like the first test is important to get a baseline, but it's not really where you're at, it's where you will be. And just monitoring that what you've been doing with your lifestyle, has that new diet adjustment been working? Or maybe we should try something else. The DEXA tells all truth, exposes all lies.
Yes,
So,
unfortunately.
yeah. And we use the results at baseline to determine what their biggest need is, and that's so much of what we do here. So yeah, you look really good, but you are lacking in the muscle mass department, especially appendicular lean mass.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we should be focusing.
Maybe explain that for not everybody will know appendicular. Yeah.
Appendicular lean mass is the total amount of muscle that's in your appendages, so your arms and your legs. And there's a higher correlation between longevity and the muscle in those specific compartments than just say your total body lean mass. And we use it as an index, so it's adjusted to your height. So if you're 6'4" and you have more muscle than me, maybe it's just because you're taller. So we like to normalize all the data there. Huge database of studies that show that the amount of muscle does correlate to longevity. So for each standard deviation of muscle increase, you actually reduce your hazard ratio, so your likelihood of dying within the next 10 years. At a certain point, it does become diminishing returns, where I always say it's an inverse U, where if you have a sweet spot of, if we're using percentiles, if you're about the 50th percentile of muscle mass, that's the sweet spot. That's where you tend to have the longest life expectancy. If you have too much muscle mass, it actually does the inverse, where your life expectancy reduces. And that could be because of a few different things, where if you have a harmonious increase in both fat, you will also have the muscle gain. So maybe that's because of the concurrent increase in fat that your life expectancy reduces. But we like to get all of our members into like that sweet 40 to 60th percentile area when it comes to just optimizing longevity. There are other cases to be made if you're into pro sport, as we've mentioned a few times, but that's sort of the sweet spot that we like to look after. In fat mass, we all know fat bad, but you got to have at least some sort of. So if we notice there's a severe fat deficiency, we need to make some dietary adjustments. And the third most important thing we look at is your visceral adipose tissue. It's the highly metabolic fat that's stored around your visceral organs. It's more of a metabolic risk factor, and there's different types of activities that we could use to target these different health span domains when it comes to just body composition. Now, quantifying this is difficult because so much of body composition has to do with
if Donnie gets interrupted, just know for listeners, he's so intense and into this moment. I'm taking a picture right now. You keep going, Donnie.
Thank you. Where was I? So much has to do with nutrition, but when we're trying to quantify this into healthy signals, it's about the duration of the total activity. And it's one of the hardest signals to increase because it's just so much about just burning calories at a steady caloric deficit if you're trying to actually lose weight. So many more people need to gain muscle mass is what we've sort of seen here in our few years of being open. Yeah. And that's why we drive higher signals to doing more of the dedicated resistance style traditional strength training. And that's been probably one of the hardest things to do here, is just get people on a consistent and moderately strenuous resistance activity. And
visceral fat.
So visceral fat has a lot to do again with diet and sleep, deep sleep, reducing stressors in your life. But when it comes to activity specifically, it's the higher intensity activities that we weigh heavier when it comes to alleviating the blight that is visceral adipose tissue.
And I think we should just say a quick comment because it's pretty fresh. I know you and some of your colleagues have just recently presented some information. It was a case study on an 80-year-old, and I think people think, I'm getting older, and when you're young and you want to have abs and you're dating and you want to look good, it's great. But I'm older, and can I still change my lean mass? Can I still change my fat mass? And I think you just presented some data. It was just within the last couple of weeks, wasn't it, where you saw it can happen even in an 80-year-old.
Absolutely. It's never too late. So shout out to Alan, current graduate student at the San Francisco State University. who just reported some of a little case study from one of our older clients, a gentleman in his late 80s, and he saw a significant reduction in fat by about 2 pounds and a significant increase in muscle mass by 4 pounds.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
It's never too late.
In his 80s, and it wasn't like he was coming in terrible shape either. Like this was a very functional 80-year-old that was optimizing, not just like trying to, minimize harm. He was trying to stay fit.
A big thing from that as well is that we actually saw his bone mineral density decrease slightly, but due to the gain in muscle mass, his fracture risk decreased.
I love that. Yeah, that's so good. Yeah.
Like body composition, it's not just about looking good. What your body is made out of has so much relevance to just health and longevity as well.
I feel, Tom, this is a whole episode. We're gonna come back on body well, like you said, we can hit each one of these.
I'm just gonna add one more things about body composition, something that we measure and we not necessarily score on, or we might score, is muscle symmetry, which is really important thing. Basically also relates to past injuries of some of our people that were doing DEXA on, and few cases that people got baseline on DEXA, they got maybe a knee replacement, maybe some arthroscopy, and we can track their lean mass or muscle mass in that limb through the recovery process. And sometimes when you go to the ortho, say, contract your quads, you're not quite there. We can quantify it specifically, and I love that component of the DEXA and how we utilize it.
And also, because it's all done in-house here, I also love, we haven't really talked about muscle quality much, but this idea of how strong are you for the muscle mass you have.
Exactly.
These themes become quite interesting as well. And I was just thinking, as we've gone through all of these as kind of like a summary statement, we started really simple and we said, how do you assess whether you're basically healthy or not? And we said health spans. We can look at these health span domains. And then you said, well, what can you do about it? And we said, well, if we know how you live, we can see how you feed each of these health span domains. And then you could see how the conversation started to get really intricate and complex across each one. You can just see how confused people can get. And I think the beauty of the Healthy Signals framework is it just makes it so damn simple and so damn personalized. And it's intuitively appealing. It doesn't sound like witchcraft and mumbo jumbo and intricate, bizarre cellular biology. It's just like the basic fundamentals of, am I living my life in a way that feeds my needs? It's really elegant. And I think it's the simplicity that makes it so appealing.
I agree 100%. David Martin.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. I think this is good for today. How much time did we get in here?
We're looking at about 50 minutes of pure gold.
Dude, this was excellent. Yeah, we can come back on any one, but that was a really nice overview of something that's novel in a place where it's almost impossible to be novel. Everybody's talking about this stuff, and I think we've got a really fun way that we've been able to explore, and at least something that we're all excited about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.